mic's wrong. I'm gonna check.
Here is just a comment that we got in the mail today.
Thanks.
Good evening. At this time, I'd like to call the October 11th, 2022 meeting of the Planning Board to order. The first item on our agenda is roll call, and I'll start at my far left.
Darren Finnegan.
Brian Dubois.
Josh Stagel.
Paul Jacques.
Evan Sear.
Matthew Duval.
Stacy LeBlanc.
Riley Bergeron.
We do have a full member who is absent, Ms. Tony Ferraro. In the case of an absence, one of our associate members steps up and acts as a full member for the meeting. We alternate. The last associate member to act as a full member was Mr. Daigle, so tonight Mr. Jacques will be acting as a full member of the Planning Board. That will entitle him to make motions and vote on motions. Mr. Daigle will act as an associate, and he will have the ability to ask questions, enter into debate, but not make motion or vote on motions. Item number 2, minutes of the approval of the minutes for the September 13th, 2022 meeting. Are there any corrections that anyone would like to put on record? None being, I would seek a motion to accept.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Abstention due to absence, I assume? Yes. The next item on the agenda is listed as a public hearing review of text amendment. It should be noted that that is an error that staff was made aware of, and that no action is being taken on this, as action on this item was actually taken in April of this year. This item is meant to act as a review of the zoning text amendment to Chapter 60, Article 12, Environmental Regulations, Division 4, Lake Auburn Watershed, Section 60-952C, Agricultural Buffer Strip, and F, 1 through 5, Private Sewer Disposal Systems pursuant to Chapter 60, Article 17 Amendments, Section 60-1447. Is staff prepared to provide a review of the action that was taken in April?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I do have, one of the board members had a question about the Fba Environmental Report. We do have copies here. They were distributed as part of the August planning board meeting, but if you'd like copies, we can hand out a paper copy to refer to tonight.
Would anyone like to have an additional copy in front of them at this time?
You'll be referring to it?
I suppose, yeah, you might as well just hand them around then.
So thank you, and I apologize for, we did list it as a public hearing in the notice that went out. I apologize for that. That was an error on our part. I do think it's important for context, though, that we at least go over that text amendment briefly, and more importantly, the recommendation that was made in April by the board, because it gives you some context for the next item on the agenda. So in April, after a number of public meetings and a lot of discussion, the planning board did recommend the changes to the septic system, private sewage disposal ordinance in the Lake Auburn watershed. After a lot of discussion, workshops, and information from both the Fba Environmental Report as well as David Roque, the former state soil scientist, and detailed both why the current septic system ordinance is not providing adequate wastewater treatment on an individual system-by-system basis. And the benefits that we thought could be achieved by changing that standard, not only for new systems, first-time systems, but I think even more importantly, for the existing systems in the watershed. There are over 270 existing systems that are currently allowed to be replaced over time to meet the state minimum standards. This new standard, required for both new and replacement systems, would require a deeper separation to groundwater than what the current standard does, and it would also move the systems higher up so they have the benefit of the organic layer that exists on the surface of the ground to provide better treatment than the current ordinance that requires the new systems to be set a foot below that organic layer and causes what was called short-circuiting in the discussion based on the state soil scientists. The planning board recommended favorably to make that change, as well as the increase in the agricultural buffering strip that you mentioned. But that recommendation was conditioned on three other things happening as part of that change. We brought that back to the council, and we'll talk about the condition number 1 here in a minute when we go into the next public hearing. But in summary, that the approval of those septic changes, as well as the agricultural buffer strip, must coincide with the adoption of a zoning change that reduces the housing density in all parts of the watershed to 1 dwelling unit per 3 acres, as recommended in the comprehensive plan. That is a recommendation of the comprehensive plan, and it's referring to the areas of the watershed that currently have a 1 acre minimum lot size, the rural residential zone. And tonight, you'll discuss in more detail the proposal to change those areas to match the standards of the low-density country residential zone that also exists in part of the watershed, but requires a larger lot frontage and 3 acres as a minimum lot size, effectively capping residential at 1 unit per 3 acres instead of the current 1 unit per 1 acre in those residential strips. The second part of that is that the city establish a monitoring of the lake and the watershed with reports on a biannual basis based on a plan developed in collaboration with the Auburn Water District and other stakeholders. The Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission is gathering water quality data already. Staff's recommendation to the council when we get there for this is going to be that we combine permitting data, enforcement data from the city with the water quality monitoring data that LAWPAC is collecting, and that report be generated based on those two data sets so we can gauge what has happened for development in the watershed, as well as any changes in water quality, to be used in making decisions about whether or not the city would enact a moratorium on development if we do see that a degradation is occurring. Thirdly, that the city require inspection at the point of sale and on an ongoing 5-year basis for all septic systems within the watershed. The way that staff is going to be recommending that we accomplish that is not necessarily to do that on our own as a city, but to partner with LAWPEC and have that be a function that is completed by LAWPEC with support from the city. But what that does is it allows the cost of that ongoing monitoring to be shared by the users of water in both cities. And it also allows for considering carrying those efforts outside of the boundaries of Auburn, where Auburn city staff can't do that. So we could potentially have that similar standard extend beyond Auburn's municipal boundaries through the authority that the Auburn Water District and LAWPEC have as part of the creation of LAWPEC. That is the summary of the April Planning Board recommendation and how we're suggesting that you accomplish the conditions that you laid out in that. And the next item is the consideration of the lot size from 1 acre minimum to 3 acre minimum.
Before we move on to the next item, are there questions from members of the the board?
I have just one brief, and this might not be the appropriate place for it, but has the city and/or LawPac discussed how they would define degrading? So degradation, sorry, the word degradation in the recommendation.
Not exactly. I think it's really going to be looking closely at development that happens and looking at water quality. I mean, water quality fluctuates over time with the current development standards. We've had some years that are better than others. I think we'll have to look closely at, has there been an increase in development, and has there been an improvement or a degradation, a lowering of water quality through the data that's already collected, Secchi-disc readings, testing of water for phosphorus concentrations, monitoring of algae, all of those things that LawPac is already doing, but it will be looked at in comparison to any development that happens. We do believe that the combination, based on the FB report, the combination of the phosphorus standards, some of the most stringent, if not the most stringent in the state, with a trigger of 200 square feet, the septic system, the improved treatment that will result from these better systems in both the existing and any new, as well as the overall reduction of the number of buildable lots by increasing the minimum lot size to 3 acres, that we can have a positive effect on the lake, and we are not creating more development than if we do nothing. So I think that'll all have to be considered in looking at that annually.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to agenda item 4, which is correctly identified as a public hearing for a map amendment. For a zoning map amendment, including all or portions of 299 parcels within the Lake Auburn watershed proposed to be changed from rural residential to low-density country residential pursuant to Chapter 60, Article 17 amendments. We will conduct this as we do our normal public hearings. We will hear from staff. Then we would hear from an applicant. However, there is no applicant in this case. Members of the board will ask questions of staff after the staff report. We will then open it up to public input. And I will remind folks of our rules for public input, but we ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes, that they remain on topic with regard to the public hearing at hand, and that you begin by stating your name and address. And I'll remind everyone of that when we get to the public input section again. After the public input section of the hearing has concluded, the board will deliberate. They may ask additional questions, and then we will move towards a final decision. So, having said that, is staff ready to present their report?
Yes. As I mentioned a minute ago, this is a direct result of one of the planning board's recommendations in considering the septic changes. There are portions, there are 3 primary zoning districts in the Lake Auburn watershed. A majority of the land area within Auburn is in the Agriculture and Resource Protection District. You can see that in the sort of grayish area that's in between all of the roadways, off of the roadways. In the watershed. I think it's clearer on this one. It's the mint green color that surrounds the lake and extends through the undeveloped portions of the watershed where we don't have existing housing developed along roadways. There's the dark brown residential strips mostly, although there are blocks of it, especially north of the lake, that are not the standard 450 to 750 foot deep residential strip that we have throughout most of the watershed. Those are the rural residential zones that currently allow new housing units on 1 acre with 250 feet of frontage. Those are really the target of the change that's being discussed tonight and that we're accepting public input on. You'll also notice that there are some areas that are a darker shade of green, also residential strips. Those are currently low-density country residential zones. Those already require a minimum of 325 feet of frontage and a minimum of 3 acres as a lot size. What we're proposing is that the rural residential, the brown area, be changed to the low-density country residential zone, because that is the zone that requires the 3 acres and the larger frontage that was recommended in the comprehensive plan. And it also slightly more than offsets any new lots that are estimated to be created based on the septic system change. So the septic change has been used to limit the number of lots that are buildable within the watershed. We recognize that changing that alone without looking at a more transparent way to control density does result in an increase of the number of homes that could be built in the watershed. If you also make the 1 acre to 3 acre minimum lot size change, then it results in a net reduction, even with the septic changes, a net reduction in the number of homes that would be allowed in the watershed under current zoning over the next approximately 80 years to 2100. There are 299 parcels in the watershed that are affected by this change, so that's 299 parcels that have at least part of the parcel within the rural residential zone that would then be changed to low-density country residential zone. The actual numbers from the FB report are here in the staff report. The septic change in the 25-year build-out increases the number of lots. And this is an estimated, over a period of time, a likely number of homes to be built. Increases the number of lots to 29, by 29. The zoning change decreases, absent the septic change, the zoning change decreases the number of lots by 21. We've looked at all the lots within the watershed and tried to estimate how they're affected by both changes combined, as well as the work that FB did in estimating those. And the net reduction over the 25 years is estimated at 3, not a very big reduction, but it is a slight reduction. Over 100 years is estimated at 39. The change to the zoning district by itself would provide a greater reduction than with the septic standards, but both of them combined does replace the septic standard with a higher functioning septic system, and it reduces the overall number of lots. I think that's probably the main point that I'd take from the FB report on that, is just that it is a net reduction of buildable lots. The estimated phosphorus loading, FB ran the results of, they had done a more detailed report a little over a year ago now. We have enacted the phosphorus changes to the ordinance. The planning board's recommended the septic changes after detailed discussion, and we're asking for a recommendation from you on the lot size. So we paid FB to come back and run a model with just those changes. We have not done everything in the report. Some things in the report would increase density. They recommended against that. These combined changes decrease density, but they do achieve some of the best practices that they recommended implementing for phosphorus and septic. In 2018, their lake model showed a total phosphorus loading in kilograms per year. You'll see that on page 7 of the updated memo that you have in front of you at 1,114. After the alum treatment, that knocked that down significantly. This goes to a question of that Matthew had asked before the meeting. That did knock the phosphorus loading down by tying up the phosphorus that's within the lake and settling it out to the bottom. That's temporary. That does get reduced over time. FB's estimate was that between now and 2100, if we just leave the ordinances the way that they are, we would see a phosphorus loading of approximately 957 kilograms per year by 2100. If we implement the low-impact development standards alone that we've already enacted, that would drop from 957 to 943. And then the implementation of the low-impact development phosphorus standards, the septic standards, and the lot size changes would drop us to 937. So it's still short of reaching the goal that they set of 900 to really drop us to another risk level lower for algae blooms. But it is a step towards that. And then their report concluded that although Auburn is doing a lot, we can't protect the watershed of the lake entirely within our boundaries without doing something in the upper watershed towns, and we would have to work with those towns in order to do that. So that's all I had for tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
I had a question about the net reduction of buildable lots. That's potential buildable lots, so that's kind of assuming that all those other houses would want to develop on their land.
Yes, and we have that scenario now where a lot of people have enough land, but they choose not to develop it, and we would anticipate that some continue to do that under the new standards.
Thanks.
But that is an estimate of the total potential buildable lots, not an estimate of what we would expect to be actually built on.
Were any numbers run if other towns in the watershed mimicked our recommendations or followed what we would do to see what that would do for the phosphorus loads going forward to 2100?
So no, we have not done a build-out analysis for the other towns. That's something that could be done. We do have the model that includes the potential build-out under the do nothing, leave the ordinances as they were a year ago. And you can see on page 10 of the Fba report that a large percentage of the projected buildings are in those upper watershed towns, specifically Turner and Hebron.
So to that point, has the city started working to develop a plan to work with those cities?
So our hope, because the city really has no authority to implement any ordinances in upper watershed towns, our hope is to have a supporting role working with LAPEC and approach those towns. We've had some informal conversations to explain what Auburn's considering within Auburn with leadership in the other towns, but we have not started a detailed conversation. And I think we'd be at a real disadvantage to try to do that at the city level as opposed to doing that with LAPEC as the lead.
And so if LAPEC is receptive to building a plan toward this?
Yeah, my understanding is that they're very receptive to looking at that in other towns. We'll continue those conversations, though.
Okay, thanks.
And I'll just add a point of clarification that LAPEC does not have the authority to implement those or impose ordinances on other towns or other areas within the watershed outside of the city of Auburn. That would actually be the Auburn Water District. So they act as the sort of rule-making entity, and LAPEC acts as policy implementation and enforcement. So it would be important to make sure that AWD is a primary partner in that discussion.
Yeah, and have there been any such discussions with AWD?
We have talked about the desire to be able to look at upper watershed towns and the desire to share in those costs with the other users on the Lewiston side of the river. And we'll certainly continue to pursue that if these changes happen. But we have not come up with a plan on exactly how we would do that. I think the level of detail that I've had discussions is more Yes, there's a willingness. Yes, it looks like there's really a need, that's a way to improve the water quality in the watershed. And then how do we get there? Let's see where we are, what ordinance changes pass, and go from there. But the city is happy to play a supportive role in trying to have those discussions with other towns.
So the Fba Environmental Report gives us some numbers. When they present their numbers based on the ordinance changes, they are assuming that those ordinance changes are only adopted in Auburn, correct?
Yes. Yep. The
So-
projected build-out under existing standards goes beyond our boundaries, but none of the change scenarios go beyond our boundaries.
Okay. So it's possible that in working, it's possible that AWD and LOPEC and working with the upper watershed could implement some of these, which might actually bring us down to that 900. Everything's a possibility, I guess, possible, but the idea that it's not just possible, it's probable that we could see a greater reduction by working with the upper watershed, because it's assumed that those towns are going to continue to build the way that they're building now.
Yeah, their projection is that it is achievable with the cooperation of the upper watershed towns, but not by ourselves as a city.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
I just wonder if you can give some information and thought about this communication from LOPEC.
So I know that the report is being prepared as a peer review from CEI. I haven't seen a final version of it yet. This board is making a recommendation on the lot size changes. I think the recommendation has already been made on the septic standards. I don't see how, it's not an official action, it's a recommendation to the council, so I don't think it's moving forward with any final decision, but I also don't see how changing the lot size minimum from 1 to 3 acres and cutting the density by a third could have any perceived negative effect on the watershed by itself.
And to add clarification, that resolve coming out of LOPEC was for CEI to specifically look at the assumptions that were made by Fba Environmental when they were creating their modeling. And CEI has done work for LOPEC and AWD in the past. Notably in 2009, we received a memo report essentially from CEI outlining some of their recommendations with regard to septic as well. But I say we, I apologize. For clarification, members of the public should recognize that I'm also a member of LOPEC, so this is why I jumped in to add that clarification, specifically what they're looking for, what it is, and if there are questions that staff can't answer about it that members of the board have, I'd be happy to add additional information. Okay. Additional questions for staff? Seeing none, at this time, I'd entertain a motion to open the public input section of the hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? The public input section of the hearing is now open. At this time, we will invite members of the public to come forward and speak to this item. We would ask that you begin by stating your name and address. We'd also ask that you limit your response to 5 minutes. I will keep time, and I apologize. It seems confusing sometimes if I kind of do the one finger thing. I'm not asking you to stop. I'm letting you know that you have about a minute left, so that way you can compose your thoughts and come to a conclusion. During this time, the planning board does not generally answer specific questions of the public. However, you will note that members of the board will be writing questions down and writing your comments down, and we will ask those questions of staff after the public input portion of the hearing has concluded. However, on occasion, we may ask you for clarification. If we interrupt you as a public speaker, I will stop your time, so that is not taking away from your time, and you'll have the full 5 minutes. It is also, sometimes we also will stop to answer a specific question if we feel that question requires an answer specifically at that point and does not make sense to be answered later. But know that in general, we will not answer questions. It is not meant to be a back and forth, but that we will make sure to ask any questions that you have raised after the conclusion of the public input. So, having said that, it is first come, first serve. Anyone is welcome to come speak. I've been asked by our tech person to ask you to please speak into the microphone. I guess last meeting, some comments were difficult to hear, so just make sure you're speaking into the mic.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Ryu, 85 Mary Carroll Street in Auburn. A little bit surprised at the fact that it seems to be a fait accompli on the septic rule, because we talked about this at the planning board meeting in August. So I don't know why you would have brought it up in August if it was passed in April. But anyway, you alluded to the fact that Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission is going to be asked to monitor what goes on in the watershed if all of this passes. And on September 14th, they passed a resolution that asked the planning board, the city council, water district to not make any recommendation until they got the peer review from CEI. And here we are, you're not even listening to the resolution that they passed, and we're having this meeting. It's a little bit hard to understand how you're going to be able to monitor if you don't listen to what they say. At the last two planning board workshops, the septic group, the chairman concluded that the proposed change to the septic should have been done 30 years ago. And he said this at two different meetings in his final comments of the night. We should have done this 30 years ago. So let's take a look at that. In that 30-year time frame, a minimum of 10,950 water tests have been done at the lake, and the results have been that our citizens can safely drink and afford the water without it being filtered. 10,950 tests minimum. In fact, the planning board 14 years ago, that 2009 you just talked about, that voted not to change the septic rule, passed the clean water test 5,110 times. The water is tested every single day, and we've passed it every single day. So did the planning board, the city council, the water district, and LAPEC not pass the change because the new septic design is not an improvement to the existing septic design? No, that's not why they voted not to make the change. Fba Environmental's report in April said, and I quote, "We have found no economic, environmental, or social benefit to allowing additional development in the watershed," unquote. That's the same conclusion that the planning board, city council, water district, and watershed protection commission made 14 years ago. That's why they didn't make the change in the septic rule. And 5,110 times they've been proven correct. So your statement that this should have been made 30 years ago has been proven wrong.
Mr. Ryu, I'm going to pause your time. I apologize. You seem to be speaking specifically to the septic. However, we're holding a public hearing over changing density from 1 unit per acre to 3 units per acre. Do you have
However-
specific,
however, Mr. Seer,
Mr.
you
Ryu,
said-
may I please finish? Do you have specific comment with regard to the public hearing that we're conducting right now?
I do, because you said that the septic rule change is predicated on the 3-acre rule. So they go together. And it says it in your agenda. It says septic on here. The two of them are combined. One does not exist without the other.
Mr. Ryu, one certainly can exist without the other, which is why they're done separately. I've paused your time. I'm not taking away your time right now. However, do you have specific comment with regard to the public hearing that we are conducting right now, discussing changing from 1 unit per acre to 3 units per acre? And I understand your point that most certainly it would be reasonable to have some discussion of the septic change within your comment. However, your comments up to this point have focused primarily only on the septic change. It's important that if you have something you would like us to take into account with regard to the density, that you make those statements now, because we are not discussing the septic tonight. We are discussing the 1 acre to 3 acres. So, having said that, I'll yield back your time.
Mr. Seer, the septic rule doesn't come into play unless you pass the 3-acre rule. Is that correct? The septic change doesn't, I mean.
Okay, I will pause again. I will answer this question.
Can I?
Would you like me to answer your question, Mr. Rio?
Can I buy a 1-acre piece of land in the watershed today and put in the old septic system?
So I feel like I
Okay,
wonder at this
I'm
point in
going
time.
to continue your time. You may run your time out, Mr. Ryu. Go for it.
Thank you. So Fba Environmental said no economic benefit, no environmental benefit, and no social benefit. So if we dive a little bit deeper into that, economically, if we build 87 new homes, and I think that's what Fba Environmental is, 84, 87 new homes is what they're recommending now, and every one of them is over $500,000 on the 3 acres, they would have a tax bill of about $10,000 a year. So that would be $870,000 that would be collected because of this new development if all 87 homes are built. That would not pay for one of the line items in the city budget, public fire protection, if we lose our waiver from filtration. So the waiver from filtration is the critical piece to making water affordable in the city of Auburn, and so there's no economic benefit to making the change. That's what they found 14 years ago. There's no environmental benefit. Even if it's 3 acres, if you have a 2-acre piece of lawn and a big house with a 3-car garage and a great big driveway, and you have a rain event, all the water is flowing off the roof, off the driveway, collecting 2 acres worth of grass seed that's impregnated with Scott's Plus 2 fertilizer,
Thank you,
running
Mr.
down to the lake.
Thank you, Mr. Ryu.
That's part of the 3 acres.
Thank you, Mr. Ryu. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Julia Harper. I'm a Lewiston resident. And as a Lewiston resident, my water comes from Lake Auburn. And I pay a fee for this service. And my interest in clean and affordable drinking water is represented in legal terms by the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission, or LAPAC. And I want to reiterate, you looked at the resolution earlier. It called on the planning board not to make any, the planning board and city council and Auburn Water District not to make any changes. And CEI's peer review study is due in 2 weeks. I also am very concerned about the potential impact of LD 2003, a state bill, which is set to take effect in July of 2023. 2023. And This bill has the potential to double or triple the amount of housing development, both current and proposed in the watershed. And the modeling for the land use changes for future build out prepared for this evening does not take into account any of that. And if we care about the affordability of our drinking water, I want to know why the planning board isn't instead working on restricting the impacts of LD 2003 that we can foresee in under 1 year from now. The projected build-out analysis should be updated with consideration for LD 2003, and the zoning changes should be adjusted to account for the impact of LD 2003 so that the result is truly a net reduction in housing near the lake. This is our public drinking water, and we must not make rash decisions that cause irreversible harm to this important public resource. Tonight, I ask you to heed the request of LawPAC and to many here tonight and table all the votes on recommendations to Lake Auburn Watershed until all the appropriate information and analysis on this matter has been complete and made publicly available. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am, excuse me, I'm Chris Robley. I'm a Lewiston resident. And I'd like to kind of use that as my starting point tonight because as a Lewiston resident, I have to admit I don't really know what my rights are with speaking, and I don't know what your obligations are to consider my perspective on this. But I'm not crossing the bridge to point my finger and tell Auburn what to do with its water, or its lake, or its land. It's Lake Auburn. It's got your name on it. So on a surface level, it makes sense for Auburn to be the stewards of this decision. But given that we're talking about the drinking water for surrounding communities as well, I'm not here tonight as a Lewiston resident, but as your neighbor, and I'm asking you to widen your sense of constituency and community, at least for this one issue, and to answer not what will Auburn do with Auburn's lake and land, but to ask yourself what you will do with our water. And I hope you will not answer that question until we've heard what's in the CEO report. When it comes to water, that's worth waiting for.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Oh, I apologize. Can you please begin by stating your name and address?
Yep, my name is Josh Managian. I'm a Lewiston resident and a ratepayer. I'm also a volunteer with organizations located in our community who are tasked with maintaining and monitoring conservation easements within Lake Auburn watershed for the public's benefit. I'm not speaking on behalf of any organization I work with tonight. My opinions are my own, and they're not endorsed by them. I also serve on the planning board just across the river, and would like to say that many of the zoning changes this body has been willing to address are forward-thinking and progressive, with a focus on rebuilding and expanding robust, vibrant, and economically diverse city in a sustainable manner. Poor zoning is the one consistent obstacle in new development that creates expensive, time-consuming bureaucratic nightmares for property owners and developers. In that vein, poorly enacted zoning creates a Pandora's box effect, the results of which are not easily reversible and can be very costly for a municipality or several sharing the same water source. But I imagine I'm singing to the choir. There seem to be two main camps concerning our shared drinking water. One believes that we should already have a filtration facility. The folks in this camp also often look to development opportunities within the watershed as justification for the initial filtration system costs, as well as the decreased water quality and the ongoing costs to filter our water, which is passed to the ratepayer and businesses that rely on our shared water source. And unfortunately, I apologize, I cannot speak to the zoning change without also talking about the new septic system. It appears that community septic is still allowable under the new model. And as your staff has noted, it creates a density that housing patterns on adjacent parcels within the watershed can promote more runoff. It can also create more piping infrastructure underground with more opportunity for breaks and leaks. It's not clear with the new wording the size adjacent septic parcels will need to be, or the number of septic systems permitted on one parcel. Looking at models, HOA developments within Freeport, you take 20 houses, a mile and a half of road, all 5-acre with their driveway. So you now create a humongous amount of impervious surface. So that said, while the new septic design is better, it only applies to new development and replacement. It does not address retrofitting existing septic systems within the watershed, which to date have not caused Lake Auburn to lose their waiver from filtration. The new design increases the likelihood of parcels being built. And it makes one wonder if the build-out modeling for new development is accurate or relevant, since it's based on rejected septic models, rejected septic permits. In my opinion, the vast majority of the 299 parcels proposed to be rezoned are capable of being approved for development, providing they meet the 3-acre requirement. That's before we consider subdividing parcels or explore the impending impacts of LD 2003, the density and new development on previously established lots, including grandfathered and non-conforming housing in the watershed. Allowing septic to be placed on the adjacent parcels outside the watershed boundaries indicates, again, a lower threshold that will encourage even more developable parcels, encroaching on the watershed boundaries, which have already been unilaterally reduced by Auburn Water District in violation of an intermunicipal agreement with Lewiston. As indicated in the memo in your packet, before there was some modifications to it, but John Blaze, Deputy Director of Planning, had referenced the 2021 Fba Environmental Report, indicating that to reach the set goal of 9,000 kilograms a year of phosphorus loading in Lake Auburn, 75% forest cover was an important water quality threshold. We were already at an estimated 1,114 kilograms per year before the alum treatment, with barely 75% forest cover. How many more lots and lawns carved out of the canopy? How are more lots and lawns carved out of the canopy going to help us reach either the goal to maintain the forested portion or the threshold? In my opinion, you must table the septic design standard and rezoning of the 299 parcels within the watershed until relevant and enduring protections are put in place to curb unchecked development and protect Lake Auburn from what may become a one-time gold rush for a few individuals with the possibility of irreversible damage to the quality of our shared drinking water for our communities. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Brenda Benner, and I live at 1660 Perkins Ridge Road. And my question is, I received this notice saying that I'm within 500 feet, or maybe it is my property, that would be impacted by this zoning change. How do I know? Looking at the map that was on the back, it's very hard to see where Perkins Ridge Road and where our parcel of land is. We have a home there. We also own a piece of land between 1700 and 1770 Perkins Ridge Road. So are we impacted, would be my first question. If so, what would be the impact on taxes with the zoning change? There's been no discussion about that potential. And then also, how do you reconcile this potential change with, in particular, the road frontage, when, you know, we're planning on building another home on our land, our retirement home, and have come to the planning board, and not the planning board, but planning department, had a discussion this spring about the requirements, 250 feet road frontage, which we have. Actually, we just bought 40 more feet to make sure we had enough buffer. The 3 acres isn't an issue. We've got, all told, about 60 acres that would be part of this property for the house. And we're actually meeting with the builder on Saturday to go over the plans with a plan of building next spring. But now there may be a whole other, you know, wheel to jump through to make this happen. How do you reconcile that change with people that are operating under what the plans and what the requirements were and have plans in the work? Will there be grandfathering? Will there be meetings with the planning board to talk about it? You know, we haven't really talked about the zoning change and how it impacts the citizens of Auburn with potential taxes, et cetera. So I think I'd like to know the answer. In particular, how do we know if we're even in that zone, which it looks like we are. I see you nodding your head. Yes, you are. So, no?
You're within,
I'll pause time.
Yeah.
This is a specific, so I will say, members of the public are always encouraged when they have a question like this to reach out directly to planning staff. Planning staff is very good about pulling up the map while they're with you on the phone and answering your specific questions.
And I certainly can do that. I've done it before. But how do you reconcile these changes with people that already have reached out and have things in the works, unbeknownst that this was going to happen? That would be my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, hi, my name is Adam Siemens. I'm the new Executive Director of Lake Stewards of Maine. Our office is located at 24 Maple Hill Road, just about 100 meters from the lake. And my comments are going to be a little bit impromptu because I had expected to be able to speak to the substance of the septic rule. However, and actually I was going to speak on behalf of our aquatic scientist and new water quality director, Tristan Tabor. He submitted written comments last week, so hopefully you've received those. However, at this point, those comments appear to be moot, but I wanted to make two procedural comments instead. The first one is that there seems, as a couple of fellow citizens have mentioned, to be a logical link between the septic issues and the acreage issues, because if you vote no on the three, then the septic wouldn't pass through. So my rhetorical question really is, why were these two things separated? I had understood that there was only conditional recommendation in April. So to me, it's actually really a fairly large procedural flaw in the process. And then the second procedural point relates to why the independent the independent report, second opinion, wasn't waited for, or why didn't we not wait for that second opinion? That's all I would have to say at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jim Wellihan. I live on 60 Woodlawn Avenue in Auburn. And I think we're all working hard to try and get Auburn and Lake Auburn to work well. But we can't be working, I'm now 84, but it works well for me for the next 2 years or 7 years or whatever there may be left. Isn't a big deal. But we are in a time of global warming, tremendous climate change, and we have seen California's water supply go to blazes. On the other hand, we've seen Pakistan be 1/3 flooded. There's tremendous change going on with global warming. One of the early reports I read from that had been done was 2 recommendations. Do not develop and plant more trees. There is probably nothing more appropriate for your grandchildren and great-grandchildren than that. Now, Auburn needs to develop, and Auburn wants to develop, and people want Auburn to develop. However, Auburn has an awful lot of land, and it doesn't have to be around the lake. And to focus on the lake the way we have in the last year or so, is just not the most intelligent way to go. So let's look at developing some land. Let's look at making Auburn a great place and keeping it a great place. But let's make sure we have protected the land and the lake for our grandchildren, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Maureen O'Brien. I live at 42 Winter Street. I'd like to speak about the process and the speed that the Planning Board and the City Council have used to pass so many of the zoning changes in Auburn in the past year, and the blatant disregard for the residents to participate in the process via referendum and/or I have watched many city council and attended many city council and planning board meetings where residents have stood before you begging and pleading for you to not make the negative and drastic decisions that affect them and their homes and their neighborhoods. Brickyard Circle and Stable Ridge being two such decisions. Instead of respecting the residents who have to live with your decisions every day, you've chosen to let developers tear up neighborhoods, wetlands, and woods. These developers are not going to live in these apartments or even in the same neighborhood. It's time to start listening to the citizens, not the developers. So many residents are trying to be included in the lake and rezoning decisions. Thousands of people are trying to be included. Why not give the people a chance to be heard?
Thank you.
Pam Rousseau, 745 West Auburn Road. I'm not going to take more than a minute. It seems that once again, our city has put the cart before the horse. The planning board voted for a T2 through 4B before you guys recommended it, and now you're not waiting for the independent report. And I find that very concerning. Along with linking, I thought it was, this meeting was on both the septic and the 1 to 3 acres, because that's what it said on the paper, but maybe separating that. So I just think that something's awry, and I just don't like it. I think that you need to wait, and you need to make them separate or make them together. Don't say, if we don't have the 3 acres, then we don't have the septic system change, because I think a lot of people would like septic systems. I would prefer to have a really good quality septic system, but it seems, it's just odd. It makes the hair on my back stand up, because I don't really trust. And so I think that just didn't sit well.
Thank you.
Good evening. I don't envy the job you have to do, but this all started out with low-income housing.
Oh,
We're not talking
Mr. Holler, I apologize. Can you please introduce yourself? Name
Yeah,
and
Fred
address.
Holler,
Thank you.
352 West Auburn Road in Auburn. This whole business of the rezoning for our city, and this isn't just the lake, this is the whole city we're trying to, this is part of rezoning. We can't separate these things. We can't separate septic systems from the water quality in the lake. There are so many variables that you have to consider with this rezoning of the lake area and rural residential and the new definitions. How many houses you put on a lot? The bigger the lot has to be, the fewer the houses you're going to have. The bigger the smaller the watershed, the easier it is to put more houses around the lake, because the different definition of what you build in the water. A watershed is not something you can just simply rezone. A watershed exists. It's a geological term. You can't rezone a watershed. That's what affects the lake. That's in the so-called watershed of the lake. You haven't spoken to the adjacent towns yet and gotten some agreements with them. You're trying to make a decision without all of the facts that might affect our water supply. The zone size of the lots, the changing of definitions, are all maneuvers to build high-end houses around Lake Auburn and threaten our water supply. I would suggest that you make sure you have all your variables understood and considered when you're making this decision. But I don't think you can change the watershed. I don't think you know what the adjacent towns are going to do yet. I would suggest you get more facts before you make any decision on our water supply. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Allie Thompson from 664 West Auburn Road. I would like to echo some of the concerns that have been stated about the misprint of the septic system discussion being a public hearing for tonight. It is intricately tied with the rezoning issue. So to shut people down for commenting about the septic system and to really eliminate that discussion from tonight just doesn't really seem to jive with when they're so related. I would also, I'm all for protecting the lake, the watershed, and reducing the pollution and the phosphorus input into the lake, and reducing the development that would cause that to happen. I am hopeful that this discussion really is purely trying to reduce that, but given the other decisions that have been made this year about rezoning, I have some skepticism about what is the real motivation behind this decision. And then lastly, I would just like to suggest a question as a point of clarification of properties within this rezoning that already have houses on them but are under 3 acres, and are those grandfathered in? Thank you.
Hi, Susan Brown, 152 Dillingham Hill Road. I hope that you will take into consideration that the scientific studies on which these decisions are being made is insufficient. The decisions that could permanently impact the health of Lake Auburn and the affordability of the public drinking water supply for generations should not be made without a reasonable understanding of the impacts. We find there is currently insufficient evidence that proposed major ordinance and land use changes wouldn't negatively impact Lake Auburn's filtration waiver. Please table all votes on items pertaining to the Lake Auburn watershed until they can be properly vetted. This is our drinking water.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, I'd entertain a motion to close the public input section of the hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Yes.
I just want to note that we did receive one written set of comments today that we distributed to the board from Neria Douglas at 465 West Auburn Road, just so it's part of the record.
Thank you. Everyone received their copy of that? Okay. I'm going to start with one set of questions that came up more than once. The concept of grandfathering. It's a term that gets used, but it's not really the term that we would use per se. A home that is in this area, were this zoning change to take effect, and now a home that was previously conforming because they were on a minimum of 1 acre with the 250-foot road frontage, what would be the implication for that homeowner and that property were this to go through if they did not then meet the 3 acres and the 300 feet of road frontage?
So it continues to be a single-family house lot, can continue to be used as a single-family home. It is what a lot of people refer to as grandfathered or legally non-conforming. It becomes non-conforming because of the city's action to change the zoning to limit future development, but it still remains a buildable single-family lot because the lot was created prior to that standard existing. I would say the one exception to that is setbacks, that if a home was destroyed by fire, then the new home would have to meet the setbacks to the greatest extent practicable if it didn't meet the setbacks before.
Why were the votes on septic and acreage, that is to say, updating septic standards and reducing density. Why were they separated?
So there are two separate sections of the ordinance. The 1 acre to 3 acre change came out of the discussion on septic standards because it's recognized that if you do the septic changes alone, then there will be more buildable lots because there are some lots that are purely limited right now by the septic standard on whether or not they're buildable. Planning board recommended that in order to counteract that or prevent that in any increase in density, council bought into that. It does require, even if we brought them through the process on the same schedule, had we started at the beginning, considering both of them, they both require their own individual public hearings. So here we are, the council acknowledged your recommendation. We've had time because we're pausing on the changes being made at the council level. So we thought it was worthwhile in considering the lot size change, but it does require its own public hearing, even if we were bringing them through on the same schedule.
The term community septic was utilized. Colloquially, we tend to refer to those as septic farms. Is that allowed under the proposed septic change?
So in the current ordinance, because the areas with 36 inches are limited in Maine, they don't occur everywhere. We've seen that happen where limited in Maine, they don't occur everywhere. We've seen that happen where people are running long septic lines, waste lines to a community septic system or septic farm, as people have referred them to. It is less likely to impossible under the new standard. The new standard requires that all private sewage disposal systems shall be installed on the lot of the dwelling unit, unless the system can be developed outside of the watershed. So there still is this possibility if somebody lives right near the upper boundary of the watershed, that they might be able to place their septic system over the knoll and outside of the Lake Auburn watershed into an area that drains to the Androscoggin River directly without going through the lake, as an example. During that discussion, we adjusted some of the text because there could be conditions where you have an existing home, an existing system that cannot be placed on the same lot. And that would be the only possible exception under the new ordinance, is in special conditions, replacement systems may be approved by the local plumbing inspector on adjacent lots, and that would purely be for a replacement system, not for a first-time system, where it's not possible to replace it on the lot.
Okay. Other questions that members of the board heard raised by the public?
Yeah, I just have one. We hear a lot of lot numbers bandied around, and so I heard people refer to the number 299, which is not consistent with the materials I have. I wonder if you can summarize where those different numbers come from and where we would be if we don't pass this versus where if we, send this to city council. If we recommend it, where are we going to be? If we don't recommend it, where does that put us?
So the 299 is the number of parcels that are in the Lake Auburn watershed that are also partly in the rural residential zone. So those are the parcels that would be affected by this change. That's where that number comes from.
Right, so the 299 is based on a one unit per acre.
And without any consideration for buildability, that's purely the number of lots that are partly or all within this residential strip. And whether they're built on, not built on, wetland.
So if we were to switch to LDCR, what does that number become?
There will still be 299 parcels affected by this change. That number does not change. The number of buildable lots changes. And that is in the staff report. So this table in the staff report shows the two analysis that were done. One was done in coordination with staff and Evan Moth, the intern, and then the other one was done by Fba Environmental. There are slight differences. They both show a net reduction in the number of buildable lots. So we'll go I don't know which one you want to look at. They're both estimates, but they both result in reduced number of lots. So the FB, environmental septic change only, increases the number of buildable lots by 29. If you implement the zoning change only, and that's without consideration for septic, decreases by 21. That's by creating the 3 acre minimum instead of the 1 acre. If you look at lot size, frontage, and likely soils to exist on a property, the combined impact is -3 changes of potential lots over the first 25 years of build out. If you look further out to 2100, septic change only increases the number of buildable lots by 57. Zoning change only decreases that by 64. And if you look at frontage, lot size, and soils, and all the information that we have available, FB estimated the combined change was -39. There are some lots that may have the existing soils that become less developable with the lot size change and are not really impacted by the septic change. Where we see the increase on the septic standards is, I guess, kind of obvious, but in lots that have somewhere between 12 and 36 inches of suitable soils. And those are the lots that would be in that become buildable, the increase with the septic change. And then some of those get reduced by requiring 3 acres, where maybe they are 5 acres now, they were counted as 5 potential house lots with a 1 acre standard. They're counted as, 1 potential without enough land area for 2 house lots under the new standard.
Okay, thank you. So just to summarize, if we make no changes on the 100-year time scale, we can add 100 houses.
In the 100-year build-out,
Yep.
that was done internally with staff
Yep.
and Evan Moth, yes.
If we make these changes, that number reduces to 61.
Both changes combined.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
And my apologies, and I think it was Julia actually that had brought this up, and I was actually reading my notes as you were asking your question, so I tuned out for a quick second. But so does that also include the projection of that LD 2003? That was Julia's comment.
So it does not include a projection of LD 2003. LD 2003 is still going through a rulemaking process. Internally, we've had some discussions about that at a staff level. And depending on what the City of Auburn does for changes, the most restrictive we can be on additional dwelling units is apply the same standard as we apply to a single family. So if you require 1 acre, then LD 2003 is probably going to require a maximum or cap what the city can require at 2 acres for 2 units. If we require 3 acres per unit, the city could require 6 acres for a second unit. So it will have impacts, but in looking purely at the lot size change, those impacts are less with a larger minimum lot size. We will not be allowed to require more lot size for a second dwelling unit than we do for a first. That's really all that's clear at this point for LD 2003, and a lot of it's still up to rulemaking.
Can I summarize that? Is it essentially safe to say that LD 2003 will allow additional dwellings that we know? Fewer additional dwellings would ultimately be allowed if there were fewer buildable lots. And changing to a 3 acre minimum reduces the number of buildable lots.
Yes, that's kind of how staff has looked at it, that the lot size change can't create more developable lots. It's creating less developable lots. And it's still in rulemaking, but the latest state guidance is that you will still be able to be more restrictive for the protection of sensitive natural resources and water supplies. So I think we're going to have those conversations, but we don't know exactly what that standard looks like until the rulemaking's done. I did have one additional question that was asked by the public, if you don't mind. Mrs. Benner had asked if her parcel was part of the change. Her parcel, 2 parcels, I'm familiar with them. They are within 500 feet of an area that's changing, but they are outside of the Lake Auburn watershed. And we definitely encourage anybody that's wondering whether or not their parcel is affected by the change or how, please call the numbers in the notice. We're meeting with people regularly. We're happy to go over those individual scenarios and make sure that it's clear. And you can make your own decision, based on the before and after, whether or not you support this.
Several members of the public brought up the CEI report. Not specifically the resolve, right? That speaks to that report. When did the city receive that resolve? When did city staff receive that?
So I don't know the exact date. It was in September. I absolutely own the mistake of putting public hearing next to the septic changes. We wanted to make sure that was discussed as a lead up to this discussion, but the change that's specific to lot size, I don't think is specifically covered in that resolve. The council could act on the existing planning board recommendation on the septic standards absent any further action on the lot size, and we were hoping to have both of them together when we do finally go back to council for some action.
Yeah, the resolve reads, therefore, the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission hereby resolves that the City of Auburn's proposed revisions to the existing Lake Auburn watershed zoning ordinances should not be amended until such time as Comprehensive Environmental Incorporated has completed a peer review of they give the long name of the University of Maine and Fba Environmental Report. Are we able to amend the ordinance?
So, yeah, nothing that LawPAC does could stop the city from continuing.
Is the planning board able to amend the ordinance tonight?
Yes, we've been asked to.
Are we able to amend the ordinance?
No, you're able to make a recommendation to amend the ordinance.
I just think it's important people understand that we are not the adjudicatory body with regard to this. The city council is the adjudicatory body that's going to have the final say over what happens. And that's important to know.
And so to that end, or to some end, I don't know what end, if city council receives, we hear from CEI, city council has the ability to actually send the whole thing back to us to reconsider in light of new information.
They certainly do, yep. Or to enact it without the information, but they're not intending to do that. We're waiting for the report before the city council takes any action.
Were there other questions?
Statement?
Go for it.
Somewhere along the line, we've confused development with really what our priority is here, of protecting our water source. I'm not sure how it happens specifically, but there is a lot going on in the city, so I can see how it would happen. If we were to sit around and have some coffee and start spitballing, we might come up with some ideas of how to protect the water source. But I'll go one step further and say that we have expert counsel, we have expert staff, professionals in the field that have given us a roadmap on how we can protect the water source. It's not how we can expand the development. It's how we can protect the water source. And if you read the report, it's not any one golden nugget, but rather a multi-pronged approach that is, incrementally better. Some of those things involve, better standards around septic design and addressing density. These are all things that, again, are not going to address these phosphorus levels, but if we do nothing, we're talking about them spiking to 957. I don't think that's in anybody's report about doing nothing. It's not about development, it's about doing something about protecting our water source. So if we do nothing, we're in a bad state. But if we do certain things and combine them together, then we're doing the things that we can control. And we've learned a ton of facts. Get more facts. I've learned a ton through this process. And for those of you that have gone through these meetings to hear professionals come in and give their input on how it's going to improve things, on how we can do our part proactively, I don't know how you can dispute it. So with that in mind, I see 957, and if we can do something about it and go down to 937, and hopefully work with other communities upstream to see if we can get that down to the goal, then I'm all for it. Doing nothing only jeopardizes our water source.
I would somewhat counter that doing nothing for another month or two, because it sounds like council is not going to take any action until we get the CEI report. I think it would help us better inform our recommendation to get another peer review of the information.
Perhaps I may have missed that, but was there a time frame when that report was supposed to be due by or come in?
I'm not sure that there's an exact date, but I know that it's coming up in the next month or two.
Yeah, it says that their conclusions may not be completed by late September, early October, which is right now, so.
Right. Thank you.
If there are no more questions or comments from members of the board, I would ask that there be a motion.
I would make a motion to table a recommendation until a date, would it be certain, or the date uncertain that we receive the CEI report.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's no discussion on a motion to table, so all those in favor of tabling? All those opposed? Motion fails. Again, we cannot move forward unless individuals are making motions.
All right, I'll make a motion. I make a motion to make a zoning map amendment of 1 acre minimum low-density rural residential district in the Lake Auburn watershed to 3 acre minimum low-density country residential district.
Can I ask for clarification? I assume you're asking that we forward a favorable recommendation to make the amendment?
Yes. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
So, I do not, I see the merit in waiting for CEI. Serving on LAPEC, I also have previous CEI reports. Our most recent with regard to this was in 2009, in which CEI recommended that there should be no increase in developable area within the watershed, and that either one, the current septic system standards should stay the same in order to facilitate that, or two, we should update to a modern septic standard. We should decrease density, buildable density in the watershed through zoning. We should increase phosphorus standards, and we should implement an inspection standard for septic. So this is information I have that you guys didn't necessarily have, but that's an independent body. This independent body that we're talking about that has already made the exact recommendations that we're looking at, and I cannot see a situation in which they would not say that we should reduce density. I cannot imagine a situation in which we would ever say reducing density is going to be bad for the quality of the lake. However, I do know that the resolve from LAPEC is just that. It is a resolve, it is a recommendation. City Council is not bound by anything to wait for CEI. They are not required to wait for CEI. So my preference would be to say reducing the density in the watershed will have a positive impact regardless of what happens with the septic. And that I want to put that in front of City Council because I do not want to be in a position where City Council could move ahead with septic in absence of our recommendation here. So that's my 2 cents. Mr. Bergeron.
I appreciate your familiarity with the reports, but I would just like one for myself to read. I do understand that they would probably make the same recommendations, but it does sound like council's not taking any action, so I don't see the harm in waiting until we get the information ourselves.
Other discussion or debate?
How do we know the council's not taking action?
I've talked about this with the manager's office. We're at the October planning board meeting. We do not have a spot on the next council meeting, so the very next one would be into November at the very earliest, so I would expect that there won't be any action until either the first meeting or the second meeting in November at the earliest, because we can't get on an agenda before that.
And we may or may not meet again before that?
We won't, because the election is on the first Tuesday, or the 7th, I think it is, or 8th. So our meeting gets bumped to the 15th because this room will be occupied by the election on the second Tuesday.
So conceivably, we could, if we were to table this, we may not get to revisit it before they do vote on it.
They may not get to revisit the lot size before they could vote on the septic change. I guess that's accurate.
For what purpose, Mr. Rio?
Just show the confusion that we're having here. It says, upcoming items for September, public hearing, considering updating septic ordinance in conjunction with changing RR to LCDR and Lake Auburn.
Yes, Mr. Rio, I believe staff has covered that. It was an error by staff, and I apologize that was made. Mr. Ryu, it is something that's been discussed with staff. They have linked the two.
I'm going to jump in here real quick and just take a pause and say I feel like we have to maybe follow rule of order. And I do see item number 7 on the agenda is public comment. So I'm wondering if perhaps then we could have public comment. And Mr. Rio, you can come up and speak then.
I will answer the question, Mr. Ryu, and I will not enter into a debate. It is something that has been discussed with staff. Staff has, since the adoption of our recommendation, linked the two together and described it as such. It has been recognized that it was a mistake. I understand that it's confusing. There's nothing that I can do about it at this point. I am letting you know that it was a mistake. We are aware of it. Action has already been taken on septic.
I think we need to take a pause and continue with.
No, we are in the middle of discussion, and I apologize to the board for entertaining Mr. Reeves' request. I should have denied it in the first place. It was out of order.
So and we have a second in motion.
We do. So is there additional debate on the motion?
Mr. Chair, just a quick question.
Yes.
What was LAWPEC's intentions on waiting, or what did they hope to come out of that CI evaluation that would differ from the original report?
The resolve was entered last minute by a member of LAWPEC. The discussion revolved around receiving additional information, and that there was no specific intent with regard to specific information being sought, simply that it be a peer review of the assumptions used by Fba Environmental. So to answer your question, I think it was best characterized as LAWPEC trying to do its due diligence, and instead of simply relying on a report by the City of Auburn, that they do their own due diligence in hiring their own environmental engineers to review information. That was really the intent of the report. The intent of the resolve is quite clear in the resolve itself, but.
Thank you.
If there is no more debate, I'll take a vote at this time. All those in favor, does anyone need clarification of the motion on the table? The main motion is to send a favorable, the main motion on the table that has been seconded is to forward a favorable recommendation with regard to amending the parcels and portions within the Lake Auburn watershed from rural residential to low-density country residential. So, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. I'm sorry, Pam, you cannot. And Pam, I know that you've been at meetings where I've been very amicable to allowing people to ask questions. Unfortunately, tonight it seems to have turned into a debate, so I'm gonna have to ask you to wait for public comment. Item number 5 on the agenda: public hearing, site plan review, site plan and special exception for the proposed Twin City Thunder Hockey Academy located at 1400 Hotel Road, parcel ID 217-071, to repurpose a portion of the existing site and building as a hockey training area with a dormitory. The proposal, is pursuant to Chapter 60, Article 4, Division 12, General Business District, and Chapter 60, Article 16, Administration and Enforcement, Division 3, Special Exception. We'll conduct this public hearing as we did the last hearing from staff, asking questions of staff, hearing from the applicant, asking questions of the applicant, including public input, and then deliberation, debate, and final action. Is staff ready to present the report?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So as you said, this proposal is to allow a dormitory at the existing building at 1400 Hotel Road in Auburn, Maine. So that's showed on this map right here. It is in the general business district. So dormitories are not listed under any of the zones in the city as a approved use, but hospitals, care homes, boarding houses, and lodging houses are included in some special exception uses under the general business district. A lodging house is a dwelling which, for compensation, lodging and meals is provided to more than 4 persons, and where a proprietor or owner may reside in the building. No provisions for cooking in individual rooms other than a main kitchen are allowed. And the definition of a lodging house, we believe, matches what this is. So for the purpose of trying to decide whether or not the dormitory should be allowed here, we're referring to it as a lodging house in this report. So the reason that this is before the planning board today is that the use of lodging house is a special exception use within general business. That's not a use that's been previously in this building. The building has been approved. It's also been noted in the original approval in 2002 that it specified that most of the building is approved as well for future tenants if those uses are allowed in the zoning district, which they are under a special exception if the planning board decides to vote for it. So the action that staff recommends is that the planning board review the proposal under the appropriate ordinances, being under the general business district zone, under site plan review, and under the special exception ordinances to see whether or not the dormitory is appropriate in this space. So the general business district, where this is located, is intended to include commercial uses serving both the city and the region, together with normal accessory uses compatible with a cohesive and attractive shopping and office area. This proposal meets the minimum lot size, and it conforms with all of the setback and dimensional requirements under the general business district. So I'll also note that there are no outside changes to the existing building. So the parking stays the same, the building itself stays the same, entrances stay the same. The building would be sharing a delivery entrance and a dumpster, sharing a parking lot, entrances on Belgrade Ave and on Hotel Road. The only thing that's changing on the inside is that the current office space will be converted into what's proposed as 12 dorm rooms and additional common areas. And it will not be the whole building here that you can see. It would be 11,085 square feet of the existing office spaces. So it would be they would be taking a part of the building for this dormitory. Let's see. So the other ordinance to review with this is site plan review. So site plan review is to ensure that the design and layout of certain developments permitted by special exception or other developments noted herein will constitute suitable development and will not result in any detriment to the city, neighborhood, or the environment. So for a site plan review, planning board should consider the protection of adjacent areas against detrimental or offensive uses on the site by provision of adequate surface water drainage, buffers against artificial and reflected light, sight, sound, dust, convenience and safety of vehicular movements in and around the site, adequacy of methods to dispose of waste, and protection of environmental features. And to determine whether whether this meets special exception requirements, the board should consider whether the special exception fulfills the specific requirements of the zone, if it creates or aggravates a traffic hazard, whether it alters the essential characteristics of the surrounding property, the neighborhood, all of the land use materials that exist in site plan, like drainage and land use and protection of environmental resources, and whether or not this will affect any city project, like any public acquisition of land. And the applicant has answered all city staff requests for clarification of the site plan, and I'm going to pull that up actually right now. They've provided delineation of existing utilities, where the traffic spaces will be, have shown the life safety plan, the traffic movement around the building, lighting plan. This is the site plan of the building. You can see this first piece here will be where the hockey academy would be. And I should also say that it would be used by, the hockey academy would host 2 hockey teams and associate coaches, resident and advisors on a seasonal rotating basis. The older student athlete teams will use the Norway Saving Bank Ice Arena for practice and attend St. Dom's Academy and return to the facility for studying, continue training and sleeping. And summer leagues would travel just between the arena and the dormitory and not to St. Dom's. That's all I have.
Questions for staff?
Yeah, so I have a couple. The first is, are they going to serve food to these kids in the? Are they going to create a kitchen or anything like that? Do you know?
I think that could be a question for the applicant.
Okay.
They're here and they want to answer that.
And additionally, for lodging or boarding house, it says that the proprietor is going to live there. Do you know whether that's the case? Again, question for the applicant. Okay. And lastly, I think this one actually is for you. Are there limitations in terms of the proximity of lodging, boarding house thing to specific types of businesses? Because the adjacent business is actually a marijuana store.
Not to lodging houses or boarding houses. To schools, there is a limitation on where new cannabis retail places can be placed near schools, but there's nothing that says how close a lodging house or a boarding house can be placed to cannabis retail places.
Regardless of the age of the inhabitants of the said boarding house. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none at this time, I'd like to invite the applicant forward. as members of the public did, please start by stating your name and please speak into the mic so that we have a public record of your comment. And so I guess what we would ask of you is, so you've already got 2 questions on the floor, and then any other pertinent information you think would be useful to us, and then of course we may ask you questions after as well.
Thank you. My name is Travis Netto. I'm with Platts Associates Architects. I'm working with Cam Robichaud with the Twin City Thunder Hockey Academy program. This is the actually second site we looked at for them through the fire marshal process to try to find a good fit for their program. The project has gone through fire marshal and has achieved its approval. So that's, I guess, an important note. The sort of renovations to the building are relatively mild. The former engineering office space provided a pretty good tenant separation and unit separation for the sleeping rooms.
Sorry, can I just have you that one?
Sure. Importantly, the interior includes a rather large common room and also a large gym facility for them to continue their fitness programs at the building. So, and then I guess in answer to the questions, if I may, there is no commercial kitchen proposed for the space. There is a kitchen cabinetry section for storage of food and whatnot. There'll be some vending machines, a sink, but the cooking apparatus will be a microwave on a countertop. And then in answer to the whether the owners are going to be staying there, each team is run by an RA and a coach. So those would be the people who are there as the, I guess, adult chaperone supervision for the project. I don't know if that's a form of owner lodging or staying. I can find out exactly who the names are of the coaches and the RAs to see if maybe one of them is one of the ownership folks at Twin City Thunder. I know they are part of the on-ice coaching staff, but I don't know if they'll be living there. I think the building is a pretty good fit for my job. It was it seems to lend itself well to what they're looking to do. The ice rink that they're spending their early morning practices at are right up the road on Hotel Road. The school is right next to the ice rink, and then they'll be back here. They're also looking at bringing on some younger summer teams and fall teams, looking at some women's hockey teams as well. So this won't necessarily be just St. Dom's type scenario. It could be some shorter term camps and that sort of thing. Always with the resident advisors and with the same 2-team, 20-kid setup. I guess with that, I can take additional questions or.
How many, what's it, 20 kids that were going to be staying there?
Each team, so we have, you have a coach, 2 coaches, coach and an RA, and then the 12 rooms will have bunks in them, so there'll be either 2 or 3 bunks in each room. So each team, as I understand, is 20 folks to a team. There's also some other spaces for community bathrooms, laundry facilities. There's an office, and the common space has a cafeteria sort of situation to it.
Not that it's part of our criteria to know how, but so you're saying there are no cooking facilities proposed, right?
That's correct.
What are the kids eating?
The idea is that their meals will not be part of this program, so they'll have to get their meals from DoorDash or have it catered or some other scenario. There will not be a commercial kitchen or any kind of cooking appliance in the building.
Okay.
To your knowledge, is there a phase for that in the future?
No, there's been no discussion of it. it's hard to speak to the future, but you know, to the extent that this program encapsulates what they perceive for the reasonable future, they do not need a commercial kitchen or any kind of cooking. When I brought it up, because it is a pretty serious permitting concern, it was not something they wanted to see happening throughout the night, and it's more of like a liability sort of reduction. You know, just have microwaves and we can handle it that way.
With that being said, and assuming it passed State Fire Marshal's office, I would assume that it is supervised monitoring by an alarm company and sprinkle.
Correct, both of those.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for staff at this point? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to open the public input section of the hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? The public input section of this hearing is now open. We'll follow the same rules as last time. If you'd like to speak, please come forward. Start by stating your name and address. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Any members of the public wish to speak?
Ann White, 19 Kendall Road. I'm within the 500 feet of the proposed endeavor. So there's not going to be a hockey arena there. It's just housing and temporary housing for kids coming in and out with supervision. Okay. And only, how long would they be staying? I mean, is this like a 6-week commitment for each of those kids and teams? For the school-age kids? So these are kids that are coming out through?
I apologize. Generally, the way it would work is if you list out your questions,
okay,
we will make sure to ask them after, but we try to avoid a back and forth between individuals during public comment. I'm sorry.
I guess I don't have enough information there. It wasn't presented well enough, I guess, that I had understood that this is temporary housing, but it's through the school. I guess that was not made public.
Okay. And do you have concerns, specific concerns?
Well, just how it impacts the neighborhood. I guess it's going to give a new feel. If it doesn't have a hockey arena, then I'm not as concerned about all the cars coming and going in the area. So that's what wasn't clear.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maureen O'Brien, 42 Winter Street. I'd like to know who's paying for this building. City of Auburn has dumped so much money into the Norway Center already, and they're continuing to do it on a regular basis for all sorts of problems. How much more is the City of Auburn going to have to pay for this?
Thank you very much. Any other public comment?
Just one more little thing here. So I got more confused about.
Oh, I
Are we
apologize.
going with this?
Nope.
No?
We get a name.
Susan Brown.
Thank you.
152 Dillingham Hill Road. And the state new law that's coming out, the 2003, that has, the potential to put an accessory dwelling unit on each property. When you guys went back and forth about that, it does affect, again, the whole big lake picture that many of us have spoken ad nauseum about. If every one of the homes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Brown.
Yeah.
I'll pause your time. Were
No, I'm
you
not.
speaking for general public comment, or are you speaking on this?
Well, I mean, in general about the lake. I mean, just,
We would love to hear, but if it's about the lake, could I ask that, we do have another public comment section coming up,
Okay.
outside from this hearing. This hearing is not the last chance folks have
all right.
to speak to us, I
Just,
promise.
then one more other thing that is outside of everything. It's just something I've noted, and I don't know if you guys have anything to do with this. And I think you don't. I think it has a lot to do with the state. But the repaving and the jughead, whatever it's called, by Lake Auburn. And now they've put down all the way up to the edge. It's totally tarred. It's blacktopped. It's not any of that. I'm surprised that once they got off of the road, that they didn't use a non-permeable, that's the right word, impermeable surface, where they've put asphalt all the way up to the lake.
So I will ask you to speak to staff about that at a later date, but yes, you are correct. That was a Maine DOT project, not an Auburn
Yeah,
project.
Maine DOT, but it's
Yeah,
like, there's
so-
the lake, and they've just put down like copious amounts of blacktop all the way up to the lake. And we've talked about it at several meetings about how the Route 4 does affect the lake, and it's, you know, the runoff and all that.
I understand, Ms. Brown. I apologize. So we've got a public hearing specific to the boarding house. All right. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to close the public input section of this hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor? Question. Understanding how it will impact the neighborhood. If I understood Mrs. White correctly, specifically thinking about traffic, so my question to that is going to be, there are multiple ways to enter and exit this facility. What is the intended route in order to go from this facility to, say, St. Dom's? I assume it would be a similar route to Norway Savings Bank because they're hop, skip, and a jump away. Are you able to speak to that?
Yes, that's the plan is, these are by and large school-age kids. So there'll be some fair amount of busing and carpooling to get them around like they do now. These are the same teams that are operating at the Norway Savings Bank Arena now. They're just now going to have a home together versus being housed at people's private homes. So it's an opportunity to take those same folks that are using the place now and house them. So
Has there been a discussion about specific routes that the facility would like people to take?
It is straight up and down Hotel Road.
I was going to say, that with the fastest way to be go, hotel,
Absolutely.
right? To exit onto hotel, not go into Stevens Mills, not.
That was the major appeal of this location, is that its proximity to the arena and to St. Dom's as well, and the fact that it is sort of a back road connection versus having having all that congestion exacerbated. So I think the entrance is the one that's right there onto Hotel Road.
Yep.
There's additional entrances to the lot for the other uses as well.
Additional question for you. Is the City of Auburn a partner in this project at all?
Not at all, not to my knowledge. This is entirely being constructed using private funds by Twin City Thunder Hockey Academy. Cam Robichaux's the president of that group. They have a number of folks that are involved. But the only way that it's sort of tied into the school at all is just their programs are timed to coincide with the school year. So each semester they have a group come in, and then they're looking to take advantage of the summer season as well to do summer camps. So that there's sort of a continual presence of kids, but it's a varying age groups from younger kids, 8, 9, 10-year-olds up to high school kids going to Dom's.
Okay, and I'm going to take that question one step further. I would assume the answer is no, because the Norway Savings Arena is operated and owned by the city, but are they financially involved in the development of this project?
No, not
Okay.
to my knowledge.
And the last question I heard would actually be for staff. We have discussed LD 2003. Would the boarding house be considered a residence, and so would LD 2003 affect this property any differently than it would otherwise, if this boarding house were not there?
No, it would not be affected by LD 2003. That district can be developed at a density of 17 units per acre already, but the presence of a boarding or lodging facility wouldn't change that.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions?
Is it fair to speculate, back to the traffic count, fair to speculate that it would be less in and out from that lot, from the business that has been there?
I guess it's a vacant space right now, so nothing's going to beat that for lack of traffic. But when you consider that it was a 25 to 30 person office with folks coming and going in the morning, at lunchtime, in the afternoon, the traffic patterns are going to be certainly different than that. The kids are going to be in the hockey rink, so their traffic pattern is at 4 or 5 a.m. Going to practice, and then they go to the school, and then they come back in the afternoon, sort of bus time like everybody knows about. So the traffic patterns will be certainly calmed versus a retail or business or any other more intense use, but it also offers some traffic calming in that those are shared parking opportunities. These folks are coming in when other folks are leaving.
Thank you.
I mean, I'll also observe that you're going to have a parade of food delivery vehicles coming in and out of there in the evening, and probably starting from when they get home from school. Because I don't think everybody was able to hear you when it was asked before, could you tell us the longest duration for which students, a single group of students, will actually be there?
I think it was 5 months when I asked them, because 6 months was an important line in the sand for me. So I wanted to make sure that we weren't exceeding that in case I need to look up what that meant for me. So, but that was the understanding, is that some kids arrive before or after the school year, and that's sort of the semester session.
Great, thank you.
Questions, comments? Seeing none, a motion would be in order.
I'll give it a shot. I make a motion to approve repurposing a portion of the existing site and 11,085 square feet of the building located at 1400 Hotel Road, parcel ID 217-071, as a lodging house subject to the following conditions. 1, a building permit must be issued by the City of Auburn's building inspector, and associated fees must be paid prior to commencing construction.
I'll second that.
Any debate? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
We are on to item number 6. City Council directs Planning Board, after consultation from the Sustainability and Natural Resource Management Board, to provide an opinion and deliver recommendations to the City Council no later than March 20th, 2023 on whether or not to eliminate the income standard and the current strip zoning limitations in any areas outside of the Lake Auburn Watershed overlay. And Mr. Bergeron and I spoke to staff about this, so we're expecting just a brief description of what this is, and then hopefully a discussion amongst the board about what timeline we feel comfortable operating in, so that we can give a timeline to the Sustainability Board.
So this resolve came from the city council. We wanted to deliver it to you. It does require a consultation with the Sustainability and Natural Resource Committee. Staff was wondering if it made sense for the chair of the planning board, if we know a timeline that the board is comfortable with, that we get together the chairs of the two boards with staff and just determine how the two boards will interact going through that discussion, so we can come out the other side with a recommendation, hopefully, that has been vetted by both boards. We added some resources that we think will be important to consider. The comprehensive plan link, the copy of the resolve, the ag resource protection zoning, both for the board to start to review those and be ready for that discussion, but also that the public was finding those resources and understood what the board and the two boards are looking at as you have that discussion. So.
Also here, so the recommendation was asked for by March 20th. So in the staff report, we just laid out the upcoming planning board meeting. So just as an idea for how we might time those discussions.
So my first question is, we received a resolve from the city council essentially to discuss a zoning text amendment, but zoning text amendments initiation is clearly spelled out in ordinance, and there are 3 ways it can be done. Does this resolve represent a council-initiated zoning amendment? Because it would seem to lack some of the criteria required.
Yeah, and we can seek clarification on that. The way that I read the resolve is that the council's looking for a recommendation on whether or not to propose a zoning amendment. So it may be either, yes, this is a good idea and here's some potential text to do that. No, this is a bad idea. We don't think it should be pursued. And then the council could use that to decide if they want to initiate an actual.
Okay, so we're not dealing with a zoning text amendment.
We don't have the text to hold the public hearings, and I think this process could develop that. If the two boards had some recommended action, we could propose a language to achieve it.
All right, yeah, thank you for that clarity.
So this feels like a time to hear the public, to talk about data and evidence amongst ourselves, and then decide whether or not to give a recommendation. Is that your understanding?
I get, my understanding is that, yes, it is time for us to be able to hear input and make recommendations whether or not we feel we should move forward with that and why or why not. But yeah, exactly as you just stated.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of this. Did the information in preparing for this meeting, I was able to get a packet that's the state put out about how LD 2003 affects localities. Is that something that you said was going to be provided to everybody on the board?
We certainly can provide that DECD guidance document. Yep, there's still a lot of questions.
It was a really useful.
Was that the thing John Blay sent?
Yeah.
It may be. It sounds like the same document from DECD that's providing guidance.
He forwarded something to us without comment a week ago, 10 days ago. Yeah, well, I got it. I don't know who else got it, but
we can make sure you have that guidance document. We can double check if that's the one that John already sent and confirm that.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Bergeron brings up an important point because, like that's in the resolve itself. LD 2003 is brought up and it was clearly part of their discussion. But I think the easiest thing to do right now might be to be able to sort of discuss a timeline. So we need to give something by March 14th.
Can I also before you do that, I like where you're going, by the way. Can we also talk about how we want to break up what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to give a timeline and then say
Yeah, perfect, thanks.
March 14th, it would be the latest that we could do anything. We have the upcoming planning board meetings here. My assumption is that we're going to need at least one. My assumption would probably be 2 workshops, given that we're discussing both ag and we're discussing strips, and it might be helpful for us to pull those apart a bit. So I'm thinking we can't really start our work any later than, if we are going to wait for the sustainability board, we probably can't wait any later than January 10th. I don't know how everyone else feels about that. Unless we're going to go ahead and start talking about stuff ahead of time. But then what we're going to get from the, so that everyone knows what we're going to get from the sustainability board is we're going to get a recommendation, and that recommendation is actually going to be comprised of input from multiple subcommittees. So like agriculture, conservation, so conservation and forestry. Who else? There are 4 or 5 subcommittees.
It's fine. I think we understand where
But
you're
yeah,
going with it.
you see where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Like, so we also need to be conscious and like give them time, because it, you know.
Yeah, and to that end, are we charging them to look at specific things, or have they been charged by city council to look at this and work with the planning board?
Wait, can we take a quick pause real quick? Because I was just taking notes as Eric was talking, and I did write down, we don't have the text yet. So I guess I'm trying to back into this. Like, so what are we trying to solve for? I know we're trying to solve for a date, and I understand that we're getting a sustainability report, but what is the end result? Are we working towards a text? Like, I guess I'm trying to figure out what we're working towards so that we can figure out how we get towards that.
If we are going to follow the resolve exactly, no later than March 20th, we will give them our opinion, them being the city council, on whether or not
Opinion, okay.
to eliminate the income standard and the current strip zoning limitations in all areas outside of the Lake Auburn watershed overlay.
And what does that opinion look like? So it is like a written form opinion, or is it through a motion?
It is a motion that we would adopt.
Okay.
I think what's difficult is we don't have text, so what questions do we ask? Well, it's helpful if we have text, because we can ask specific questions to that, so.
Do we need that report? Do we need that to get to start the discussion? Like, can there be a workshop before we get that report, or is that something that the workshop would be completely useless without it?
I think we can work before that. It says the city council directs the planning board, after consultation from Sustainability and Natural Resource Management Board, to provide an opinion and deliver recommendations to the city council. So we can do work ahead of time, but we're going to have to be smart about the work that we do and not get into the weeds, knowing that we're going to get recommendations that might change specifics that we get into.
Can I ask a quick question to that too, just an aside? So one thing I've learned through my short time on the planning board is, and I've heard this repeatedly even today, is that the public feels like there's not enough information. So as we look to drive towards March of 2023, do we have to weave into this public comment, notification, and all of that? Because I think all of us collectively have heard repeatedly that the public doesn't feel like they've been informed enough.
So what will happen is, of course, posting agendas. Because it's not a zoning amendment, because I'm hearing it's not a zoning text amendment process, we wouldn't be required to have a public hearing, but I agree it would be in our best interest to, if we don't hold a public hearing, at least hold public sessions, right? So that way we can hear. But I think what's going to be helpful, I wonder if we really need to have a workshop that the public has access to, so that they can see the information that we've got at that moment in time in our discussion, so that they can formulate questions, and then the following meeting being primarily devoted to public comment and public input. with a subsequent meeting being primarily devoted to development. This is a really actually short timeline. Believe it, like, it doesn't seem like it, but it is.
Yeah, and so going back to that, I agree with everything that both Ms. LeBlanc and you have said, but what is our relationship with the Sustainability and Natural Resource Management Board? Are we charging them with looking at specific things, or are we giving them this resolve and seeing what we get?
I think that's up to us. We will be meeting on Thursday of this week, and anything that the planning board sends to that board through me would help provide them direction. But I think, Mr. Duval, your question is a question for the board. Do we want to just see what we get, or do we have specific questions that we want the sustainability board to push out to the subcommittees?
Would it be something that we could get their input and then ask them more questions and get more input by the next month's meeting?
I don't think that would be feasible because of the structure of the sustainability board, because it's made up of subcommittees, and they don't all meet regularly at the same time or even monthly per se. It would be difficult. Ideally, that would be the way we would do it, right? We would work with one other board, but the issue with working with the sustainability board is that you're essentially working with oversight of 4 or 5 subcommittees, which would make it difficult. I don't think it should stop us from asking questions and sending them back. I just think we need to be cognizant that we might not be able to rely on that primarily.
What are your thoughts about that, setting aside maybe 30 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on what the agendas allow for, at the November and December meetings to start to go over some of these resources that we're compiling? And you've mentioned the LDT 2003 guidance.
Perhaps pose a couple of questions.
Yeah.
And maybe schedule a public information meeting and feedback session for late December or early January and involve the sustainability board in that. So maybe at the senior center or something.
I might have missed this. When are we getting the sustainability report? Because I'm backing into this as well.
We don't know. We're asking. We need to decide when we want it by.
Okay.
So,
and one option too would be to maybe have the chairs of both boards to maybe meet to discuss what a process there could be, or what that might look like to deliver that recommendation.
So that's actually going to be, that's on the agenda for Thursday.
Okay.
Of course, pending any feedback from the board that the board gives tonight.
So you have a meeting scheduled with the chair of the Sustainability Natural Resource Board Thursday, or the whole group?
Yeah, the whole board is meeting
Okay.
Thursday.
Oh, okay.
Great.
So as a member of the board, I would be happy for the chair of the planning board to work with staff on a timeline that the chair feels will work. This is a very short timeline. I think workshopping this right now is really difficult.
Yeah, it's hard.
But I think having you as chair work with staff and come back to us with a schedule for this work, I think I would be perfectly comfortable with that.
It's a lot.
And I think it's a better use of our time. And, since I brought it up, the charge, a very basic charge to that sustainability board would be something like pros, cons, and opinion on whether to eliminate the income standard, and pros, cons, and opinion on whether to eliminate current strip zoning limitations.
Actually, I think something like that would be most useful. If we just got like, hey, we want the subcommittees to tell us why this could be good, why this could be bad, and ultimately what their opinion is on it and why. Yep. Well, yeah. If we are going to have me work with staff, I would just ask that, so like Mr. Bergeron brought up, feels it's going to be important for us to have LD 2003 and the current guidance that's available, even though we know it's not final guidance. I 100% agree. I think it would be helpful for members of the board to email that, ask, say like, I want to know right? Like why the current income standard was developed, what the process was there, or whatever it is you all think that you need to know, so that way we can help create that workflow. Does that work?
I also think something, because this says all areas, and there might be areas that make more sense than others, to see if there's something where they're like, no, we can't do that here, or we could live with it here, or something like that.
I think we have a lot of leeway in here, actually. It was not particularly specific. Okay, so that we can move on. I'm hearing start workshopping at least background information and pertinent information like LD 2003 in November, December. Asking me to sit down with staff, talk about a workflow, as well as with the chair of the Sustainability Board. And do we have a date that I can bring to the Sustainability Board that we want their final recommendation or opinions by?
So to me, you're probably going to want at least 2 meetings, one to workshop what they come back with and one to hold a public hearing. I would recommend public hearings before that per Ms. LeBlanc's recommendation, but I think, so the latest would be, you know, whatever, February 7th.
You think February 7th is
or
enough
February
time?
1st is just a round number.
Okay. I think that could put us in a position to have a special meeting in February, but it is also sort of trying to honor the time of the Sustainability Board. How do people feel about that, say, by February 1st?
I thought we just outlined a January 10, late December, early January.
That was my recommendation. Mr. Duval's.
I think it was also Mr. Cousins.
To be clear, mine was, that's the absolute last moment.
So when do we want it? Do we feel comfortable getting it at the beginning of February, or do we want it by sometime in January? You guys just gotta say it so I can bring it over there. Like that's
January preferred.
January.
You would prefer January?
January 1.
The more time we have with information can only be better, so I'd say January too.
Okay. I will say that to them prior to our January 10th meeting, and make it clear that our packets are put together by the Wednesday prior to that, so that's, you know, they've got the first week of January to work on it too. Yeah? Everyone feels comfortable with that? Staff, do you feel like you have what you need?
That works. Thank you.
Okay. You have been so patient, Mrs. Russo. And the next item, public comment. We'll run this as we run all of our public comment. And there's no topic now, so you don't have to stay on topic. So.
Pardon?
I said, and there's no topic now, so you don't have to stay on topic. So.
Well, that's a good thing, because now I've got 2.
All right.
So I'm going to go back to the question I was...
Oh, Pam, and I apologize. Could you state your name?
Oh, Pam Rousseau, 745 West Auburn Road. When you go to the 3 acres, we talked all about the deforestation. So if you're going to allow 3 acres for a house, is there going to be any limit on how much they can clear cut? Because it is the forests that keep our lake clean. And the other one is going through what is allowed for building, and it did say bed and breakfasts and stuff like that, not just single residential units. So what would actually be included in that? I know bed and breakfast is listed, and then it talked something about section something, and I know what it allows now is more, but so what else would be allowed? Because I think that what you built there would be very much different as far as pollution goes and what goes into the lake. So that was my other question.
Were you talking specifically about
increasing the lot size around the lake? All right, so I'm on the Ag Committee. So I was, first of all, I'd like to say, I thought that whenever it was, I've been coming to these for a while, that we got rid of the strip zoning and now you're putting it back in from 750, what would it go to 350 again? So what is this?
We didn't get rid of it.
Well, I know that it didn't go through because I was at the meeting, and maybe was it just tabled or what happened with that? Because the strip zoning, we had this whole place filled, and it was 750, and then it went up to 350, and everybody came out, and I was really excited because it wasn't going to go to 350. So is that being revisited again? So, you know, I was in all those meetings, so I know that that's what happened. The other thing that I think that the same thing when we were, whoops, almost tried to kiss it. The same thing that when we were told to go from four committees to one, we get told like in December, and then you have the weeks of Christmas and New Year's, and then right after that, we're already supposed to do something, and I think that that's unreasonable to ask us to do something within that short time. And yes, we do meet every month, and we do keep in contact with each other, so that I don't think it's unreasonable at all, because we do meet every month, and we do have communications. The concern I have about making no income standard, or making, hopefully I hope you would not make no income standards, because then that takes, so we have global warming, we have really high gas prices. I don't know, I work at the Historical Society, and when there is a shortage, they were begging people here in Maine to grow food. And so I would hate to see that the ag zone became great big honkin' $1 million houses, because they do not have to have an income. So I think it isn't either an all or nothing. I think that there are some things that were discussed in other meetings, and we can certainly bring those forward to you, because we don't want, I sort of feel like the purpose of this no income, and most of us I think all of us on the sustainability umbrella feel that that's just a way to build big honkin' houses that are $1 million and can be, and get rid of our ag zone. So I just throw that out. And besides, we just had a PFAS presentation, and right now there are some places in the state where you have that they have had to destroy herds. And so, and he was at the meeting there, we need to have our ag zone, even especially for hay. I know we have a lot of haying that happens up in around Young's Corner and up West Auburn Road and along Summer Street. There's a ton of haying goes along there, but that's not, as far as we know, there's no record of any PFAS there. And those have to be, that's what our cows and goats and, not the chickens, but they have to eat. So that is really a good resource for us to supply our herds here in Maine. And we are farming, you know. Maine has always been farming. And if you ever want to know, I can show you the 1860 census. So it's really important that we have that ability not to just, I just really feel like this is a way to get rid of our ag zone and develop it.
Thank you, Mrs. Rousseau. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the board during this time? All right, seeing no one, we will move on to item 8, miscellaneous upcoming items for November. Have all members of the board had a chance to read through these? I would hope so. I would assume so, but. In the absence of going through each individual one specifically, it might be more informational for the board if anyone has questions about any one of those upcoming events, upcoming items.
I have no questions.
Okay.
I have a question
Yeah.
around conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Item number 3, I have no current affiliation with the program. Actually, that's not true. My business sponsors the league.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to make sure that we're doing everything above board. Again, I have nothing to gain, but just want to make sure it's transparent.
Yeah, and that's something I'll have to bring up too, because I actually coached All-Stars this past year, and I don't see why I wouldn't again in the future if my children are playing. So maybe I will, between now and then, make sure that staff has like a clear-cut description for us at the beginning, knowing that Brian and I are going to be stating our involvement with that organization. My question is about 1 and 2. Are you guys going to forward us all the previous information? Because this might actually be like the 3rd or 4th time we look at those, if I recall, those areas.
And this isn't a requirement that those are all on that agenda. This is sort of the upcoming list that could be on that agenda. I think we'll work with you to make sure the agenda's manageable and that people that get notified have a chance to get to their item.
Okay.
And can just to your point a little bit, for both of these, I think we had, the board had a bunch of questions or more information that I wanted, and I just want to make sure if they come forward that information comes along with them.
And actually, since we have discussed this and there were lots of questions, whatever, if item 1 and 2 or whichever ends up on the next agenda, could we get, because you guys have done the presentation of those and you've answered some of our questions already, some have not been answered, but can you send us those, that information that you've put together, that you've presented before, like well in advance? So that way.
And video links to those discussions if you want to watch.
All right. There used to be a thing on here for planning board members to say something. I've been thinking about what we're doing and how we're promoting growth. I think we've seen multifamily, I think, by virtue of the economic benefit right now, right, given the housing market. But my preference would be to begin thinking about how we can incentivize single-family home, duplex, triplex, so essentially owner-occupied housing as infill. So I would like us to have a discussion at some point about some of the things we think we could do to do that. I mean, like, for instance, I would love for us to approach city council and say, so we know that they're coming up with these pre-approved housing plans. For us to identify those housing plans that we think best fit that model and say, like, listen, for someone who's doing an owner-occupied project, could connect with a landowner, and we can help them pay for something, as simple as like the surveying, right? So just small things like that, but tied specifically to that owner-occupied piece. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because that's something I would like us to look at as a planning board, because we've been stuck sort of in like, we have been, stuck is the wrong word. We have been responding to councils and how they would like to see growth happen, but it's well within our right and purview to say, within that, this is what we would like to do and what we would like to see. So I'd like us to start exercising that. Is there anything else?
Yeah, these 3 items, that wouldn't be exclusive to the next planning agenda, right? There are other agenda items that are likely to surface between now and then?
We are, Auburn Suburban is there because we received a partial application the month before. We also received a zoning petition that'll be on the agenda for November.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? The meeting is adjourned.